Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Hooked on You by Kate Meader, narrated by Pippa Jayne. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Wayne Gretzky, NHL Hall of Famer. I am not throwing away my shot. Hamilton, an American musical. Prologue. She needed a drink. And while Violet Vasquez wasn't big on boozing before 5, she figured that now might be as good a time as any to start. Neither was she big on signs, but the one that had caught her attention had to be the universe telling her something. The bar, called the Empty Net, had 2 hockey sticks crossed like cutlasses over the door. Yeah, someone was screwing with her, she thought, as she exited the cab on the main drag in Riverbrook, 30 miles north of downtown Chicago. And she had an idea who. But she wasn't one to back down from a challenge. Day drinking would commence in 3, 2, 1. Pulling the heavy oak door open, Violet walked out of the sun and into a bar fight. On closer inspection, this was pretty tame, as bar fights went. It had the makings of a doozy, though, because at the center of it was a Hulk. A long-haired, bearded, fuck-with-me-if-you-don't-want-to-live behemoth. 3 guys with a death wish and/or shit for brains surrounded him, all but begging to be crushed. One of them was right up in his face, his spittle-flecked lips working soundlessly, his fists clenched at his sides. Another had the Hulk boxed in on the shorter end of the L-shaped bar with a pool cue in his hand. And number 3? This joker was clearly the spokesman, and right now he was getting something off his chest.
"You're a lowlife, St. James,"
the leader spat out.
"You haven't had a good season in years. You got some nerve showing your face around here."
St. James, which was sort of ironic because this guy looked like he rode with the devil instead of the angels, didn't defend himself, just held himself taut, ready. "Better not be any trouble," a female voice called out. The bartender. Violet, familiar with the undercurrents of drunk drama from her nights tending bar at Rusty's Biker Emporium in Reno, recognized the thread of concern in her voice. She was staffing the place alone in the middle of the afternoon. Maybe they had security at night, but right now this woman was helpless to break up a fight with anything but diplomacy.
"There'll be no trouble,"
the Hulk said. And though he was responding to the bartender, the message was for the 3 stooges in front of him. There was also something odd about his voice. Deep, resonant, and Irish? As the guy with the pool cue moved closer, the bartender caught Violet's eye, her expression one of mild panic. Violet shook her head slightly. She trusted that the Hulk had this under control, that he could diffuse the situation.
"You don't want to do that,"
he said to Pool Cue. "I'm calling the police," the bartender said. "Nope, not helping."
"No, police,"
was the Hulk's response. But he said it like Pole-is. Now Violet heard it more clearly. She'd watched enough Outlander episodes to recognize a Scottish accent. No sooner had he affirmed that the law was not needed than the idiots surrounding him burst into action. Clenched fists raised his right hand, only to have the Scot react with lightning speed and cover it with one king-sized paw. At the same time, he grabbed the cue from the other guy's hand, smashed it against the bar, and held the splinter-topped weapon to Pool Cue's throat. Crushing a fist with one hand, threatening a jugular with another, he stared directly at the guy who had been mouthing off, and raised a very expressive eyebrow. Violet's entire body tingled, and her heart thrashed about. Oh, the Scot was something else. The lynch mob spokesman backed up, hands raised.
Got it. We're just talking. Go talk over there.
A chin jerk from the Scot indicated another part of the bar. Rather charitably, to Violet's mind, he released the raised fist, then placed the shattered cue on the bar. The bar fight that had never quite started expired with a whimper as the men slunk away to lick their wounds. Violet took a look at her surroundings. For early afternoon, the bar was surprisingly busy, with a few people playing darts and a couple of guys at a pool table. The TV screens blasted a hockey game, though it was mid-September and out of season. She knew that much. But the entertainment shouldn't have been all that surprising, given the bar's proximity to the arena of the local NHL franchise, the Chicago Rebels, the team she now owned. Violet stepped forward and picked up the other half of the cue. Carefully, she placed it with its soulmate on the bar. The Scot didn't acknowledge that, as if he hadn't even noticed her, which was generally impossible because, on a noticeability scale of 1 to 10, Violet usually landed at 9. But not today, because for this visit to Chicagoland, she'd gone conservative and changed her hair from magenta streaks to its original dark and dull brown. Damn her conforming hair color. Mr. Surly took a seat and caught the eye of the bartender, who walked over, looking like she was this close to having a coronary. "You okay?" The Scot turned slightly, and Violet realized that the bartender was speaking to her.
Oh, fine. Chivas rocks, please.
She climbed onto a bar stool beside the Scot, who was frowning in a most attractive manner.
Plenty of seats elsewhere,
he muttered. Oh, you old romantic, you. The barfly gods were shining on her, because at that moment Violet's Chivas appeared. Extra tip for you, barkeep.
Yeah, but my drink is right here.
Evidently unable to fault that logic, he spoke to the bartender.
My usual, Tina.
Are you sure? He cut off her question with a glare. It's your funeral, she finished. Nicely handled, Violet said when Tina was out of earshot.
What's their problem, anyway? Me.
I got that. She imagined this guy would be a whole lot of problems, at least 75% of them sexy. Why, specifically, did they want to rearrange your pretty face? He turned, eyes narrowing on her.
You don't recognize this pretty face?
She looked more closely, not a chore in the slightest. She supposed he did look a little familiar. Kind of like if Jason Momoa and Gerard Butler had gotten down and dirty and sweated out a big-shouldered beast child. While her body's tingles moved south, she reassessed the situation. Sports bar with hockey on TV, proximity to the Rebels arena, expectation of being recognized. He must be one of the players. She played dumb. You owe them money?
Owe them something. Or they think I do.
Tina placed a shot of Johnny Walker before the Scot, and, with a humph, moved off. Interesting. Violet took a sip of her Chivas. The Scot had yet to lift his whiskey. They sat in semi-comfortable silence for a few moments, while Violet thought this through. The past 18 months had been the road trip to hell, but Violet had made the return journey, and now she tended to look at things from a different angle. The year of the V, she'd been calling her adjusted outlook. She was determined to try new things, step up and be counted, find out who Violet Vasquez was, for want of a less vomit-inducing phrase. Fear had a way of closing a person off, making the world a small and lonely place. Fear could go fuck itself. The next time she had sex would be the first time since the surgery, since she'd woken up, bound like the mummy, with new breasts to replace the diseased ones. A quickie in a bar restroom with a hot stranger would be the perfect way to jump back on the horse. Clothes would stay on, scars would stay hidden. The Scot would be strong enough to lift her against a wall and slide right in. Then she'd be on a plane back to Reno, her pleasurable memories, the best souvenir. Before she could turn on her rusty wiles, the stranger spoke.
You disagreed with Tina about calling the cops.
She liked it better when he called them the Pole-is. But the notion that he had been aware of her silent objection, even while he had other things going on, was a pleasant surprise.
I've worked in bars, most of them not as nice as this one. The threat of cops, in my experience, usually escalates an already bad situation.
He studied her now, as if she had suddenly said something worth listening to. Those tingles started again, her body reflooding with sexual awareness. She was unable to look away, and it seemed he was in the same boat. Something charged, hot and melty, zinged between them. Her nerves were no longer tingling. Now they were shrieking.
Whatever you're thinking,
He murmured.
It's a bad idea.
Blood heated her cheeks. Was she so obvious? She picked up her drink and took a gulp. When she looked up again, he appeared closer, more dangerous.
Season's about to begin, so you thought you'd come in here and bag yourself a player?
Now wait a second. Who the fuck did this guy think he was? So maybe the idea of gracing him with the pleasure of giving her an orgasm had crossed her mind for a foolish moment. But what kind of asshole said that? As if she were some sex-crazed hockey groupie. Yep, that's exactly what I thought. And then she winked. He laughed, and the sound gave her heart a hug. Still got it, Vasquez. The bartender shot them a glance, then peered curiously at Violet, laugh-maker. The Scot turned serious again, his blue-eyed gaze flicking to the untouched shot of whiskey.
Go on home, lass, before you get hurt.
By you, she snorted. I don't think you could hurt anyone. She'd seen how he handled those idiots. He could have done some real damage, but he chose to restrain himself. It would be fascinating to see him lose control. He inhaled a weary breath.
That's where you're wrong. I have a tendency to destroy everything I touch.
He raised his gaze to her, and what she saw there shocked her, a pain she recognized. I'm tougher than I look, she said, not quite willing to let this go, though common sense told her she should probably run back to Nevada as fast as her combat boots could carry her. He stood. Loomed was more accurate, all 6 feet 2 inches of him, yet there was something both aggressive and tentative in his stance. Color flagged his cheekbones. Fire rimmed his eyes. Her own greedy gaze was drawn to his thick forearms, then continued on a trail down to his 2 clenched fists. Was he angry? No. Or at least, not with her. Oh, God. He was using every ounce of his self-control, trying not to touch her. She had never wanted someone to lose a battle with his demons so much.
You driving?
He managed in a harsh whisper. I came in a cab.
Good. Make sure you go home in one.
With his strong accent, it came out sounding like, good. He threw down a 20 and left without a backward glance, his shot of whiskey still untouched on the bar. The bartender, Tina, came over, her expression one of disapproval mixed with pity that Violet had been rejected. Not that Violet really saw it that way. What had happened between her and the Scot was far more thought-provoking. "Want that?" Tina asked, nodding at the shot glass. "Nah, I don't drink swill." Tina laughed appreciatively, picked up the glass, and poured the shot into the sink. "So, who's been warming this bar stool beside me for the past 10 minutes? You really don't know him?" Violet shook her head. "I'm new in town." That was Bren St. James, current captain of the Chicago Rebels, the local hockey team, though whether he'll be captain for much longer is open to speculation. No need to ask for details because Tina was in full flight now. He showed up to one of the last games of the regular season drunk, and the way he'd been playing all year, it was clearly not the first time. Most people think he should have been cut long before that, and some people, she jerked her chin in the direction of the troublemakers from earlier, who were now back to playing pool like nothing had happened, think he needs to be taught a lesson. Folks are pretty crazy about hockey around here, and when your team is suffering through its longest championship drought in the league, it makes the fans loco. The players, too. Sports people. Fucking nut jobs, the lot of them. Before Violet could inquire further, the bar's phone rang and Tina went to answer it, while Violet was left to ponder Bren St. James, the grumpy Scot shrouded in mystery. A man with demons that needed soothing and sating. Oh, Captain, my Captain. The year of the V had just become a lot more interesting. 1. 8 months later. Bren sank his ass into one of those low-slung leather chairs specifically designed to make a man feel small. The last time he'd sat in this office, he had left with orders to dry out or get out. Miraculously, he'd escaped with his job, if not with his dignity. Now, he was back on a different mission of mercy. The man he'd faced the last time was no longer in charge. Clifford Chase had finally choked on his own bile, and Bren didn't miss him. Harsh as it sounded, Cliff's death was the best thing that could have happened to the team because in the 8 months since he'd bought the farm, the Rebels had gone from zeros to heroes. This was largely due to the woman before him. Harper Chase, all 5 feet 1½ inches of her, would probably not agree with Bren, but she was more like her father than she'd care to admit. A complete hard-ass, but unlike him, she had a gooey center, which was now on display. "Bren, we're going to do everything in our power to support you and your family. Now, how are the girls doing? This must be a shock for them."
"Aye."
Bren rubbed his beard. A playoff beard because the Rebels were in the postseason for the first time in 15 years and thought about how much he wanted to share with his boss. But he and Harper went way back, and now wasn't the time for reticence. Not when his ex-wife had screwed him over again.
"They've wanted to live with me for a while. It's just that the circumstances are not exactly ideal."
"I know you've missed them," Harper said, leaving the rest unspoken. What she probably wanted to say was, "I know you've missed them, but your ex-wife chose the worst fucking time to have a meltdown in the granola aisle at Whole Foods and then check herself into a clinic for a rest. The worst fucking time being 2 days before the start of round 1 of the playoffs in Dallas against the top-seeded team in the Western Conference." "What about your in-laws?" Harper asked. Bren's stomach churned at the mention of those vultures. 2 days ago, he'd received a call from Drew Cassidy, his ex-wife's current boyfriend. Kendra needed space, though the online pictures of the place where she was staying definitely put it in on the spa end of the spectrum, and had called her parents to care for the kids. Drew might be the guy who banged Bren's ex-wife while she was not ex, but he wasn't a complete asshole. "They're your kids, man, and I figure you should know. Kendra didn't want me to call you. She just wanted to let her parents handle it, but it doesn't seem right." No, it did not. 3 hours later, Bren was in Atlanta and in a face-off with his in-laws, the Gordons, who had chartered a jet from L.A. to get there, to steal his fucking kids. "This is what Kendra wants, Brendan, and as the girl's primary caregiver in the divorce, her wishes should be obeyed. Catriona and Frankie are coming to L.A. with us." Bren could have gone ballistic. Every cell in his body itched too. But that would have scared his girls and given grist to the Gordons' mill. Instead, he'd called his lawyer, explained the situation, and then calmly told his in-laws what was going to happen. The girls would live with him until Kendra was better. The Gordons could visit, but not for a month, until the girls had settled in. If they wanted to make a fuss, they'd better load up their guns, because Bren would never back down.
"Not an option,"
Bren now told Harper.
"and you know I don't have any family nearby."
His parents were long gone, and his stepmother in Winnipeg wouldn't be interested. Besides, the idea of sending his kids away was like stripping his skin to the bone. They'd lived with their mom for the last year, and now he had them again. Shitty circumstances, but he had them. This time, he wasn't letting go. "We can arrange something through a service," Harper continued. "Nannies shouldn't be hard to find."
"I suppose,"
Bren said doubtfully. He'd need more than a nanny. How about a housekeeper? On top of that, a tutor would come in extra handy because there were 2 months left in the school year, and he'd had to pull them as soon as he heard what happened. So 3 different positions right there, because he doubted Mary Poppins actually existed. "We'll all chip in and help, Bren," Harper said with a cheer that was starting to piss him off. "Until you find someone, they can stay with me during away games." His head snapped back.
"Harper, I can't let you do that."
Harper sat in the other leather armchair beside Bren, hands clasped in her lap, her petite stature making her sink even farther. "We go back a long way, you and I," she said quietly.
"Aye, we do."
He'd started with the Rebels' feeder team in Rockford before his call-up to the majors 11 years ago. He'd had chances to leave, but he stuck around through the bad times and worse. One of them was finding Harper in the Rebels' locker room, her lip bloody, another player looming over her and shaking out his fist. That bastard didn't remain on the Rebels much longer. Left a couple of teeth behind, too. Harper might think Bren's defense of her created an obligation between them, but not as far as Bren was concerned. She had repaid him handsomely last year. Instead of canning his ass when he showed up for a game drunk, she'd persuaded her father to give him another chance as long as he entered rehab. He'd spent the past 11 months acting like a monk. No booze, no fighting, no sex. Christ, he missed sex.
"You don't owe me this, Harper. I'll figure something out."
"What? We need you in Dallas when the team flies out tomorrow."
"The girls can travel with me."
"They're 9 and 11, Bren. You can't be dragging them all over the country. They need stability, and we need you playing to the best of your ability and not worrying about who's looking after them. We'll work on hiring professional help, but for this first round of the playoffs, you're going to have to let us help you. The Wags are on the case. Me, Addison, Isabel, and—"
"No, Violet."
He almost spat out her name, immediately regretting how much it revealed about his state of mind. What he didn't regret? How his mouth felt when shaping the word Violet. It had a musical quality that had always appealed to him. Pity its owner was far too appealing. Harper looked understandably taken aback. Well, she's not a wife or a girlfriend, but I'm sure she'd help out if asked. In fact, given that she doesn't have an official role in the organization or an actual job, she could prove useful. He snorted. What was wrong with him? Usually as stoic as they came, he found it near impossible to control himself whenever the youngest daughter of Clifford Chase was mentioned, or came within earshot, or was near enough to touch and taste, and "She's sort of flighty," he said, trying to sound reasonable when his thoughts on Violet were anything but. "A party girl. This wouldn't interest her." Catriona and Frankie had endured far too much insecurity, most of which was Bren's fault. They didn't need an unreliable slip of a girl like Violet who laughed too hard, flirted too much, and did an admirable job of getting under Bren's skin. He wasn't fool enough to deny his attraction to her, but then he'd always been drawn to wild women, like his ex. And look how that turned out. "My lawyer thinks I have a good chance at full custody, but I have to do this right. Dot the I's and cross the T's, keep my head down and my nose clean." He let her infer the rest. He refused to give Kendra any extra ammunition, and that started with ensuring that his daughter's child care arrangements were handled professionally. Harper patted his arm, as if his Violet objections were the most natural thing in the world. He felt a little guilty at painting her in a bad light, and even more so now that Harper seemed to readily understand. "We'll figure it out, Bren. Let the girls stay at Chase Manor while you go to Dallas for the first 2 games. I'll work with an agency to set up some interviews for a more permanent position. I can even arrange to have someone open up your house and get it ready for the girls." The house. He hadn't even thought about that. While his daughters usually stayed with him in his rented apartment when they came to visit once a month, they had all once lived together in the house on the lake. Being back on their old stomping ground might help them adjust to the big changes. "That'd be great, Harper." She squeezed his arm. "We old-timers have to stick together, Bren. It's also what family does, and the rebels are family." Violet had never been a fan of kids. Okay, not exactly true. She wasn't a fan of the small, wrinkled, poopy ones. Ankle biters fared much better in her eyes when they developed personalities. So, faced with the sight of 2 kids in the Rebels' front office suite, girls of an indeterminate age because Violet could never guess these things, she was curious because personality radiated from them. She'd seen St. James's daughters once before from a distance. Now, close up, she tried to determine if they looked like him. Both dark-haired, one had a snooty air to her, while the other rocked a nerdy look with glasses. They sat in the chairs outside Dante's office, eyes glued to an iPad and a book, respectively, looking a little lost. Behind her, a deep voice rumbled. "They don't bite, you know." She turned to take in the hotness that was Dante Moretti, general manager of the Rebels. "Can you guarantee that?" Dante shrugged one broad shoulder, encased in a dove-gray designer suit. "These ones? No. I only have experience with a couple of mouthy Brooklyn chicks who would sell their souls for Taylor Swift tickets." Violet laughed softly. "Your nieces sound adorable." Perhaps sensing she was being studied, the girl who looked older, 10, 14, squinted in suspicion at Violet. Reminded that she sported purple-streaked hair and was dressed in a denim mini that showcased her tattooed thighs, Violet offered a smile to affirm she was one.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?